on the show, I'm going to get us going, okay?
Okay, let's rock.
Hello, I am Deb Coviello, the Drop In CEO, and I want to thank you for joining us again on another amazing episode. I hope you think it's amazing, where week after week I get to speak to the most fantastic leaders. And in the process, I'm inspired by their work, and I hopefully they inspire you. And if you love this podcast, and I know you will, please subscribe, rate, review, tell others so others can really appreciate this great resource. And just know I am here to help the C suite leader of today to navigate your challenges and opportunities with confidence. And today I am thrilled to welcome onto the show Brian Christopher Murphy, who, in the heart of industry, trade, and commerce, strides a goal oriented industry professional whose name resonates with many of today's leaders. But behind the corporate scenes lies a lineage of excellence and leadership that stretches far beyond the boardroom. A distinguished veteran with over 4 decades of experience spanning professional, commercial, and government enterprises, he exemplifies the 21st century leadership. His journey epitomizes the transformational power of thought leadership and a beacon guiding industries into the tumultuous ways of the coming 5G quantum AI era. I'm so grateful for having found Brian. I welcome you onto the Drop In CEO podcast.
Well, thank you, Deb. Thank you for having me on.
So, to my listeners, this is about networking. I was searching the internet, I was in pursuit of CEO, C suite leaders, because I am on a journey to understand what makes them great, their thought leadership, and learn from them, but also bring their insights to you so you can be the leader you were meant to be. But Brian, I am going to give you the floor right now. You've got an amazing backstory. I'd love for you to share a bit about yourself and for my listeners, a little bit about your backstory and how have you arrived at the work you're doing now.
Okay, well, I began my career at 19 years old, the tender young age in the United States military. Um, I had started out, I wanted to be a computer programmer, but technologies were advancing so fast and computer languages so fast. I thought everything will be obsolete by the time I even graduate. So I decided to pursue business and an MBA instead. But I started out in the military at 19, which would have been 1986 was when I enlisted. I did 2 tours overseas, Germany and Italy, and I'm a graduate of the US Army Quartermaster Academy at Fort Lee. That's where I began my educational journey after high school. So at a very young age, being in supply chain transportation logistics and having a quote unquote real job, I started out with high levels of responsibility already, just being in supply chain. And then also I was a unit armorer. Well, that's a position of not only great responsibility, but trust, because I had access to the company's vaults. I was responsible for all the weaponry and munitions and accountability for all of that. So that is something that really shaped my leadership style today. Was just having that, because in the military you have to have that discipline to do that, and that's the number one thing people come away with. So that's kind of where I began my career, and where I am now at 58 is, as a CEO and either board chairman or advisor to the boards of multiple country or companies across multiple industries, because everyone has to deal with supply chains. And one of the things I understand, I think, better than most is not only supply chain logistics, but demand chain logistics. So many today's leaders and C-suite executives fail to look at both sides of the coin, because you not only need to understand what your customers want, but all your employees, your staff, at all levels, what they want and need. and what the customer wants and needs, what your vendors want and need, because everyone is a part of that human resource supply chain. I remind people that your staff, your employees, 1099 contractors, they're all customers too. Employment or contracting is a two-way street. And one of the primary things, I embody in leadership is I say, I'm a leader, I'm not a boss. Managers, supervisors, they're the bosses who see to the day-to-day operations of the company. My job, I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan or not, but you'll know who Tyrion Lannister is. But my thing is, I think and I know things. That's kind of what I do more as a leader versus a boss.
I
And the
love that.
difference between the two being, empathy versus authority. I've done it so long, I've developed a feel for it.
Oh, that's
Uh,
keep going. I am so inspired by these words. Just keep going, Brian.
Yeah, so, this is kind of what has shaped my style because I feel what is happening. I have that ability to put myself in the other person's shoes, no matter where we are, because I don't look at the pyramid or whatever shape you want to look at to where I'm up here, you're down there. It's I'm over here, you're over there. It's a level playing field. Where do you sit at the table? Whether you're at the head of the table, the side of the table, the other end of the table, in the C suite, everyone has their position and everyone has their part to play.
I
Understanding that part as well as the parts of the other people on your team, you have to be working together. And as a leader, at the quote unquote top, I have to be the one that sets the example. That is an example of a leader. You lead by example. But it's a tough gig because heavy hangs the head that wears the crown, and it can get very heavy.
would love to
I've
respond if I could, because
absolutely.
there is so much in there. And you you think things and you know things, and that's super important because as leaders we don't necessarily have to know everything, but we need to be resourceful and have a very good network. But one of the things you were painting a picture of is having a seat at the table, and this is something that I share a lot with my listeners, is that sometimes we place leaders on a pedestal and we see ourselves as rank and file and we don't have a voice. And I was seeing in the way you described it, you might be at the head of the table, and then all the people around it, everybody in an organization, given the right culture, could have a seat at the table if they've got good thoughts. They know how to communicate and project a message. A good leader will recognize leadership and thought, regardless of where it is, and everybody can have a seat at the table.
Right. It's not a rectangular or oblong table, it's a round table. And it's kind of everyone has a certain right of or possession of position of ownership,
Mhm.
because I see it no matter what your involvement with the company is, whether you're a C-suite executive, you're a manager, you're a supervisor, your staff, an associate, a 1099 contractor, a W-2 employee, uh, whatever. And everybody's a customer to some degree,
And
because it's more two-way interaction regardless of the nature of the relationship. And really a leader understands that. And that to me epitomizes thought leadership. How would it feel from the other person's perspective? What would you think if you were in their shoes? Because someone, like you say, so many people just, well, I'm afraid to speak up. We don't, none of us really wants to do anything that diminishes us in the eyes of others because we don't want to look bad. But you have to kind of sometimes gauge, because sometimes it's best to be the lead and out front. It's like Mel Brooks says in the history of the world, it's good to be king.
It's good to be the king. I know that.
Yeah, but it does have its problems and pitfalls. But ultimately, what I try to do is lead by example to show people the way because I've been doing it so long. I've got a feel for it. I don't have to really think about it anymore. It comes natural. But I kind of learned what to do under what circumstances, because sometimes we may be accused of hypocrisy because, well, you say one thing, but you do another. Well, it depends on the situation. In one situation, I may do it a certain way. In another situation, I may do things differently. One of the things I tell my customers, who or anybody who comes to this company, you tell me what you need, when you need it, and where you need it, and I will make it happen. But different situations require different solutions because flooding in this area versus flooding in that area, and you need the resources to recover from that, because a lot of what my companies do is crisis response to
Mm,
whether it's natural disasters or naturally occurring, or I say naturally, but you're putting up an office building. So you kind of know what to do, but maybe not under these circumstances, but particularly in a crisis situation, such as involving natural disasters. Oh, you have to take into account the area. For instance, I was involved in the flooding in Dubai. Well, they're on different time zones than here, so that changed my schedule considerably. But this is where they were having the worst heaviest rainfall that they had had in 75 years. And this is an area of the world where they're on a sand substrate. If that water stands for very long, well, then you have liquefaction. Things will start to sink, and so you've got to get that water out of there, because what happened in that situation was it was a stalled storm system. Instead of falling across a large area, it all came down in one area. And so their storm drain systems, which are excellent, by the way, just couldn't keep up with the flow. And so they had flooding. But once,
mhm.
once the storms were over, well, things kind of naturally drained away. But what do you do in the meantime? Because in the meantime, the power grids are shut down,
Yeah.
uh, because you don't want anybody getting electrocuted in that flood water. So it's kind of knowing what to do in every given situation, because for them, that was like a once a century type event. Here in Mississippi, that's spring for us. Every year we have to deal with stalled systems. And of course, we're in a hurricane prone area, which runs from May to November,
Mhm.
and hurricanes tend to spawn tornadoes. So, yeah, just being ready for those,
It's
FEMA and MEMA and all the different government agencies, when they encounter things they've not had to deal with before, well, that's where they need, people who are just versed, because
yeah.
having been in the military, you never know what's going to happen, what area or theater you'll be operating in. You could get deployed here, you could be deployed there. So after a certain number of years, you just kind of develop a certain degree of proficiency and being able to adapt very quickly. Because your primary job, my primary job throughout multiple industries, is just knowing how to locate and get the resources that
Mhm.
companies need, whether it's human resources, capital resources, equipment resources, and who's got them at the best prices. And another thing too with vendors, it's like, well, you may think you're buying this product from that company, but that product is actually made by a different company and private labeled.
Yeah, it's amazing the work that you do again through your company and how you help catastrophic logistical nightmares. I am really appreciate the work that you do. I've never really interviewed somebody that is expansive with your experience and does that kind of work. It's what makes you so interesting. But I just want to go back to your humble beginnings because you talk about being in the military, for which it's something that's near and dear to my heart. My son right now is in the Army at Fort Liberty, Fort Bragg, and my husband also served. My nephew's in the Air Force, and it's something that I really care about. And whether you're a leader or maybe your youth listening to that. Military is a noble service. It is a noble career for which you, of course, have gained so much um, from it. But I have two questions for you on this. One is, what was the inspiration to pursue the military at such a young age? Because it is a viable career option for many, not necessarily starting out with college, but going into the military. And by the way, you're distinguished and you have some awards. I want you to talk about that because it's not one thing to do a job, it's something to come out with notoriety. So, your beginnings and your achievement, please.
Right. Well, I enlisted in the military because, being a young teenager, I wanted to see the world and
Ah,
always wanted to go to Germany. So I did because the Army said, oh, because they give you a choice when you first start out. What are your first three choices of where you would like to go? And they'll do their best to accommodate that. And I said, well, I want to go to Germany. And they said, okay, well, what would you like to do? And I said, I don't know. As long as I get to go to Germany, I don't really care. Oh,
yeah.
and as long as I get the educational benefits, the
Mm-hmm.
GI Bill, that was my second reason for joining. It was mainly to see the world and to be able to get educational assistance, even though my parents said, we'll pay for it. I was like, no, I'm a man now. I'll pay my own way, but thank you for the offer, and I'll definitely keep
Beautiful.
that in mind should I need it.
Yeah.
But just really just kind of wanting to grow up and become an adult. And uh, so I started with that. So really, they just said, well, you know what? We're offering a $2,000 bonus if you'll go to the Quartermaster Academy and learn to be a quartermaster, supply chain specialist, whatever. And I said, hey, as long as I get the GI Bill and I get to go to Germany, I'm fine.
There's a common theme here. Travel.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of young people, that's kind of what influences their decisions. It may also be just simply a desire to serve their countries. They do
Mm,
it out of patriotism. And I always encourage young people, if you're considering military, yeah, absolutely do it. Because now today, I thank God for my VA medical benefits because I don't have to worry about what it's going to cost, particularly being service disabled. I don't pay for anything really, but even if you're not service disabled, well, the copays are so minimal,
mm,
like maybe $10 for a doctor's visit or something like that. But yeah, kind of my humble beginnings were, I started out in the military overseas in Europe, and I was there for 3.5 years. And really, the awards came because I was in what was a hot zone.
mm,
But having that high level of responsibility as an armorer and being a weapons specialist, and I'm being responsible, I had the codes for the vaults for three companies. I was an aviation cavalry unit, a combat unit. That was an extremely high level of responsibility. And I was entrusted with that. But during that time, I was awarded the Army Achievement Medal 3 times, which
wow.
is the second highest award you can get. That's equivalent to like Purple Heart and Navy Cross, but it was for meritorious service, not being injured in battle or bravery and valor in combat. Although I could have been in combat had hostilities broken out, because again we were so close to the Soviet Union and there could be spies everywhere, and
Mm.
you just don't know. Even things were peaceful, but still just never knew what was going to happen.
So that's
Um, but at that
amazing.
age, you don't really think about it, because you're still young and just could tend to think, you're still impervious and invincible to harm simply because you've never come to harm before. But no, it could happen. But
That's amazing. And I just,
so it really kind of began there and just continued on. And just one of the things I say from then to now, from the battlefield to the boardroom, I have never wavered in my commitment to excellence and service to my country. And one of my company's logos is America, or veterans in business, still serving America, because I'm very heavily involved in veterans affairs, veterans organizations. I'm a patron to Wounded Warrior Project and helping disabled veterans and their families because they have programs similar to Ronald McDonald House. Because if a veteran has to go to the hospital for a surgery or to be hospitalized, well, of course, the family wants to be there because they may not live near a VA. And well, then they've got hotel expenses and things like that. And so Wounded Warrior helps with stuff like that, as well as, just helping veterans, because pretty much when you're service disabled, VA covers everything. If anytime I've ever needed anything, the military fully covers it. Like if I had sleep apnea I was dealing with at one time, and they took
Mm,
care of getting me a CPAP. And when I needed surgery, that was all fully covered because I had my gallbladder out a few years ago. That was fully covered.
that's amazing, all of
Another
this. Yeah.
time, yeah, I actually had the end of a finger torn off. And that
Oh,
was
dear.
emergency trauma surgery. It was almost $30,000, but they fully covered it all. Even though I didn't go to the VA, I went to a local hospital because that's the kind of thing that bankrupts a lot of people is medical bills.
I understand. And so
I
I
do know VA has or has had a bad reputation. That was mainly post Vietnam because that was not a popular war and just not a lot of funding went to VA. But today, because of Iraq and Afghanistan and other events, our military is very well supported. And so consequently, VA has a lot more funding. And so they're so much better. But even comparatively, I look back from, the beginning to the end because I've been in the VA system pretty much my entire adult life. And I honestly don't really have any complaints because I've worked in private hospitals and I find them to be pretty much all on par each other. And if anything, VA is superior because they're always next to university medical centers. So they tend to be on the cutting edge.
So, what I'd love to do is be able to bring it back to your area of expertise. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for sharing all that. That's the gift of me having the opportunity to interview people such as yourself, because I get to learn stuff and be inspired by all that we are. It's not just the work we do, but it's who we serve, it's how we are as humans, sponsoring and supporting. So, I really appreciate that. But I want to still leverage your leadership perspective. You're a CEO, you advise CEOs, you've been around a lot of people around the area. And what I want to do is pull out, from what you've seen, what is one lesson or something that you would like to impart on them to improve their leadership? Because you've seen a lot of good, you've seen a lot of bad, but what is something that you would like to share with my audience that you think is really important?
Well, like I say, I think if you're a CEO or C-suite executives, or really, think of yourself more as a leader, not a boss.
Mhm.
Because again, particularly at that level, you are being paid to think. That matter of fact, that's primarily what you're getting paid for is to think. This is why CEOs of companies such as Sony, Home Depot, the big, 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 big companies that employ thousands upon thousands of people, really focus more on, the empathy versus the authority. Because again, we look at the salaries these, people have and think, oh my God, it's just obscene. No, it's not, because the amount of money they're paid is a small fraction of what they're making and saving these companies because my just job one for me is making certain that every single person involved with the organization has a job and continues to have a job. Uh, I know some backstory. I had because I speak before high school groups, college groups, just industry, trade, organization. Now, I love speaking, by the way, whether it's live or virtually. And,
And that's
so
why you're here.
right. So, but a high schooler asked me, what's the worst part of your job? And it chokes me up to even think about it. It scares me to death. It's the idea that I may have to make a decision one way or another that's going to involve people losing their jobs, because my job one is keeping everyone employed. I do not want to put anybody in a position of going home to their families and saying, I don't have a job. What are we going to do? Because
Mm.
that's just a nightmare scenario. So part of my job, being, the eye of the storm, ultimately, the calm before the storm, during the storm, after the storm, to keep the ship upright so we never ever run aground, so that you can sleep soundly at night knowing I will have a job tomorrow. And so will my children and my grandchildren for generations to come. Because when I start a company and are involved in a company, my intention is that company will be a legacy company. You may be a CEO today and you're second, third, fourth generation C-suite, because really you're the steward of that company. You're not necessarily its owner or major shareholder. You're its steward if you want that company to last. But you have to be in a position too where you can step away from the company and let it run itself. And a lot of people have trouble doing that. But if you can't step away from the company for a while and let it run itself for a little bit, well, then you can't reasonably take a vacation. And ultimately, you don't run a company or own a company, you own a job. And that's a big difference. I rest at night knowing everybody is employed and will continue to be. But likewise, that, I can take a break because I know I've got people behind me who can take over. And one of the big rules I advise people, everyone of, of key decision making ability, and in some cases, they have to be the one that makes that decision due to regulation and laws and whatever, has to have a second. There has to be somebody else who can do what you can do at least as well, if not better, so that if something happens to you, if I'm incapacitated for some reason, accident, illness, injury, someone has to be able to take over in such a way it's as seamless a transition as possible. Because at some point,
Mhm.
one day, you're going to want to retire,
Yeah, and then start
or you
another
may
career like
have
you.
to retire, due to things
Yeah.
beyond your control. It could be, again, accident, illness, injury, or you just want to take a sabbatical for a while. I've done that at times where I took a month or two or six just to kind of decompress for a while.
And if I
And
could respond
really,
to that, I really
yeah,
would love to respond to that, is the fact that if I think about, some of the advice that you have just shared with C-suite leaders, it is about like leaving your legacy, but leaving a lasting impression because, like you said, your primary goal, one, again, it's a business, keep the business going, but you sincerely have this empathetic tone and caring about the people. If you care about the people, they're going to take care of you. They sleep at night, you sleep at night, you've left your legacy, and then you can move on to the next and the next and the next career, which I would love to talk about the next journey, because you are transitioning into a new area. You talk about, things, people, you are a thought leader. That's why you are here today. But I would love to know a little bit more about the impact you want to make, because you're showing up on podcasts, you're starting to look into media. What is this next chapter about that you're trying to go into?
right. And this is almost pretty much what I kind of considered or consider, well,
Mm.
we'll see,
Uh-huh.
the final chapter, because I'm 58. I'm getting closer to that magic retirement number of 65. So it's kind of like, what do I want to do now?
Uh-huh.
Because
Uh-huh.
really, a lot of being a CEO, a board chair, and helming a company or helping others helm their companies is, where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what kind of fun can we have along the way? Because it's not just about the destination. It's about the journey because there's any number of routes we could take. And maybe this one's more conservative, the
Mm,
route. Then maybe this one's a little more adventurous, but kind of being able to feel that empathy part of leadership, having a feel for it and kind of knowing, is it a good idea to take this route or might that one be better? And how
mm.
much time do we have? Do we have time to maybe stop off for a coffee or, hey, maybe even detour through Las Vegas and put our luck on and see what happens? Or maybe we'll head down to the beach and swing by there and taking some good deep sea fishing and seafood along the way before we kind of move back, because the shortest distance is between 2 points, a straight line.
Mhm.
But well, a little curve or a detour, well, then maybe you can swing by the ice cream shop and we all get ice cream or pizza along the way. Then that way we don't, we can get back out a little quicker if we have a little food along the way and don't necessarily have to fully break for a lunch, especially if we're having a great time and then enjoying the ride. Because when the day comes that, I it's the end of that final chapter.
Yeah, but this is between you and me. We're not dead yet. We're both about the
Yeah.
same age here. And yes, we have been in service to others, whether it's a company or to the country. But this next chapter, because I think there's a lot to learn from what you're doing. A lot of people will continue to do what they've done over and over again, but we have lives worth living and leaving our legacy. I'd love for you to share a bit about where you think you're going and detouring and taking that long and winding road. Again, you've been successful, but you have more successes ahead. So tell us what this next chapter is for you.
Well, really, a lot of it, like I say, besides thinking and knowing things, is for
Mhm,
the most part, I have to think ahead. I have to have foresight, the ability to see what's coming.
mhm,
A lot of that just comes from I've done this so many times under so many different scenarios. I've just developed a feel, and there's where the empathy comes in.
mhm,
Typically when you're young and just starting and don't have a lot of experience, well, that's when you tend to be a little more by the book, by the
mhm.
rules, just to keep it safe, to
Sure.
CYA, as we would say in the military, cover your assets,
Mhm, mhm.
because particularly the longer you've been at it, again, you do start to develop that feel.
Sure.
Uh, for instance, I was, at one point I had to learn to drive trucks for transportation logistics and get my CDL. Well, I was terrible at backing when I first started, as a lot of people are. And so I tended to look for pull through spots to make it easier. But then I told myself, you need to learn to back because there won't always be pull throughs and you're not going to get good at it if you don't try.
Mhm.
Everybody tends to be not so good at things when they're just learning, but like you can almost time it to the day. After about a year, you've done it so many times now, you've got it down pat. So you don't
Mhm.
even have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, that's great insight. So, um, I'm just going to pause a second.
Sure.
Liz, we're gonna clip this pause out of the conversation, but just I'm going to pause a second. I asked you just wanted to showcase a little bit, Brian, and again, I'll restart the question. I wanted to showcase the fact that you're going into a thought leadership space, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about, I've got so much knowledge, I've got so much. I'm into podcasting. I'm thinking of a media company. I want people to see the life after career military. This is the next chapter because you want to leave your legacy. So, if that's okay, I'm going to restate the question. Liz, I'm going to restart the question and then we'll continue. So, Brian, I would really love to know more about the next chapter. You've had an amazing career, military, being in service, and being a CEO, board advisor, so accomplished. But this is not the end for you. I'd love to know more about where are you going to now leave your legacy?
Well, I've been such a doer,
Uh-huh.
throughout my career and, a mover, a shaker, a big money maker.
Yeah.
But I've done so much. Now I want to help others do where I become more a mentor and a coach.
Mm.
and showing others how to do it. Because I'm at the point I pretty much know how to helm just about any kind of company, uh, just because there's certain commonalities they all have, and
Hmm.
everybody's got supply chains. So that's kind of where I find my fit, no matter what the industry. And to me, it's like string theory, and I've learned how to play it like a harp or a
Hmm.
guitar, or I know exactly where to touch and nudge things. I know where to slow things down. Uh, so now it's really more mentoring and coaching and showing others the way. And so, like I say, typically as a board advisor or chair, I'm really just meeting with CEOs and, C-suite members once a month or once a quarter.
Oh,
Uh,
wonderful.
so that gives me the time. That's kind of where I'm focusing now. And that's kind of where I'm more getting into involved in embracing the media in general, because it gives me such a greater, broader reach by guesting on shows or
Hmm.
having a show or a show within a show, or it's where I can help the most people, to maximize their careers, who maybe they're around the same point I am, where they're just starting out,
Hmm.
or just kind of give people a general direction to kind of work in. But for the most part, a big thing I would advise people: one day at a time, one thing at a time. You do have to be forward thinking, but not too far ahead, because you don't know what's coming, and that gets into the areas of crisis response, knowing what to do when and how for whom. Because what I might do in one situation, I might not do in another. Again, it depends on the location. If it's in this part of the world, well, you're working in a different area and environment versus this part of the world, where your supply chains operate entirely differently, for no other reason because how those governments operate. Some governments are more libertarian, such as
Hmm.
Mexico. Other countries are more strict, because you do not want to fall afoul of government regulations, because that will definitely get you in trouble quickly.
So,
Uh,
Brian, I am so grateful that I found you. And like you said, you have so much knowledge to share and many shows to show up on. I really, really appreciate the time you spent with my listeners. And there are so many nuggets of wisdom and leadership throughout. And I know that you're going to continue to have an amazing impact and continue to leave your legacy on other C-suite leaders. But I want to give you the floor one last time just to share a last few closing thoughts with our audience before we bring it to a close.
well, I would say in closing, I am available if you would like me. And if you would like my help and assistance, you can contact me through the company website, or, I now have a YouTube channel.
Woohoo!
And then I'm also working, like I say, with multimedia, social media, and kind of have shows within shows, because it seems like every time I go on a show, they keep wanting to have me back, but it's maybe every week or every month or just something, because there's just so much to learn.
Mm.
And that's what I want to mainly do now, is to teach others what, let other people benefit from my years and my decades, so that as I'm on the way out, and to leave that legacy, like they say, always leave them wanting more.
Oh, such great words. And when you use that word legacy, it is so much similar to the work I do, helping others not to make the same mistakes, bequeath or share the best insights. I'm so grateful that I found you because your insights, I'm hoping, will translate into better lives, more time spending time with family or doing the things that they love to do. And I just want to say, Brian, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for dropping in. And I want to wish you continued success, and we're going to continue to stay in touch. So thank you for being a great guest.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me on, and I am more than welcome to come back, anytime you want to have me back, because questions just lead to more questions, which leads to just even more content. And just that's why whenever I do a guest spot, it tends to become recurring, because, keep them coming back. And because it just, you want to know more and more and more. It just becomes compelling.
Mm. Thank you so much. You be well.